Hi, I'm Commissioner Raquel Regalado. Thank you for joining us on your lunch break. Today, we're talking with one of our amazing community partners about the different programming and opportunities that we have and how we work with them and how we can work with you to do more and provide these services to all the residents of Miami-Dade County.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us in this educational webinar for Business Week. Today we're going to be going over tips and tricks for professional development with We have Galila Ibrahim.
Thank you so much, District 7's Commissioner's Office, for hosting me today. I'm super excited to come and speak to you guys, both as a budding young professional and as someone who's curated this initiative to help individuals gain access to professional development training programs. So just a little bit about me. Yes, I am a University of Miami student. I am graduating, hopefully in a couple of days from now, um, pursuing a degree in international studies and philosophy with minors in geography, sustainable development, political science, and Arabic studies. So suffice it to say, I like to keep myself busy and well-rounded. And I will be matriculating this fall at George Washington Law School. So I've had quite a bit of opportunities to get acquainted with both being interviewed and interviewing other individuals through different roles that I've held. I've worked and interned with 6 different NGOs, and I've been fortunate enough to work with my senator back at home, Senator Chris Van Hollen, as a policy fellow. So I've been kind of everywhere. I've had office jobs now for the past 4 years. I've worked with the vice president of the University of Miami as a student secretary there, and I'm currently holding a position at our leadership and development office at University of Miami as a student experience coordinator. So I spend a lot of time behind the office creating PowerPoints and just outreach in general. Now, the reason why I came to District 7 and Miami-Dade County in general, talking about these different initiatives was because of my capstone. So was thinking about the best way to help the community was through education. Obviously, I'm a little bit of a nerd. I love to study, and I felt like having these opportunities working with different professors and professionals really opened a lot of doors for me. So I wanted to give back and do the same thing by creating the EduPower Initiative. So the whole goal behind this initiative was to help individuals from vulnerable communities. So if you're a woman, homeless, low income, anything like this, or if you have a limited English proficiency, this was my primary target. But I realized that education can be a tool for anybody from any background. So we've expanded it to anybody now residing within Miami-Dade County to get access to these free professional development trainings. I received a grant to help give these out totally free, and I created these 4 trainings, doing different research in terms of figuring out what would be the most relevant. So I have one dedicated to childcare, one dedicated to healthcare, one dedicated to professional development in terms of tips and tricks, which is the one I'll walk you through today. And then one in terms of effective communication in professional settings. So all of these are online, self-paced, and if you go back to the website, which I have linked at the end of this presentation, you can go and get certificates to add to your resume. Speaking of resumes, I wanted to give you a quick overview on what we'll be covering today. So we'll first go through how to develop a professional resume, interview tips and tricks, netiquette, as well as the impact on AI in terms of job acquisition and the way that people review resumes and how people interview today in general. So, going back to basics, I felt the best way to approach this was giving you that basic definition. So, a resume is a concise, informative summary of your abilities, education, and experience, and it should highlight your strongest assets and skills and differentiate you from other candidates seeking similar positions. So, I'm sure you guys all know what a resume is, but maybe haven't heard this formal definition. So, now that you have this idea, this is essentially supposed to be your professional snapshot of why they should hire you. But you might have seen this CV also being referred to a lot, and understanding the distinction when an employer is asking for your CV versus your resume is pretty important. So your CV is going to be your overarching document which records all of your professional and educational background. So this can be anywhere between 2 to 10 pages long traditionally, but there's really no strict limit. So think of your CV as your life story as a professional. Whereas your resume is only a snapshot. So this should be anywhere between 1 to 2 pages and should also be tailored specifically to the job that you're applying to. So instead of having your whole life story, maybe it's just one section related specifically to, let's say you wanted something in public policy, something that has to do with politics, let's say. And then the second major distinction is the intended audience. So when you're using your CV, this is primarily in academic settings. So let's say you're going for a research position or you want to try and become a teacher, a professor, they may request the CV to see the type of research that you've conducted. Or if you're applying for positions internationally, this is the typical formatting. However, for a majority of us, I feel like we'll be going after these US based jobs and going for stuff that's not really research focused, in which case you would be using a resume. And now we're going to go into the function of your resume. So as I'd mentioned, it's really important that this functions as a snapshot rather than your whole life story, because this is the first thing that your employer will have the opportunity to look at and get to know you through. So traditionally, an employer will spend anywhere between 6 to 10 seconds reviewing this resume. So how you present yourself within it is really important. And then, as I'd mentioned, AI has totally changed the hiring market in terms of the way employers approach resumes and resume reviewing. So now, 48% of hiring managers currently use AI to screen your resume, which means that a robot or a code will actually look at your resume before it even touches a human desk. And this number is projected to go up to 83%. So, having this in mind, it's really important that you format your resume properly, but also make it very palatable and incorporate keywords to ensure that this gets beyond that initial screening process. So I have a video that I'm going to show you guys, just a quick 2 minute snapshot about, how this is impacting the way people are going after jobs, but also just different like stories and techniques provided by a resume professional.
New job, you may need to adjust your resume. That's because an artificial intelligence tool could be the one scanning your resume first.
At least 48% of hiring managers say they're using AI to screen applications, and that number is expected to grow over the next 5 years. So, we have some tips to help you get your resume into the hands of a human.
Adjust my resume.
Meet 20-year-old Mo Kathawala and 50-year-old Brett Sandman. Both are in very different stages of life, but they're experiencing the same challenge, looking for a new job.
For 50 to 100 positions. I've been looking for over a year, which was honestly unexpected.
With headlines of layoffs and hiring freezes, finding a job can feel impossible. On top of that, more and more companies are relying on artificial intelligence to find the best candidates.
I'm in this war that AI is having with AI.
For over 6 years now, Daniel Bullen with Beacon Resume has been helping people navigate the art of resume writing.
Sometimes I'm the first person people have talked to in 25 years about a resume, right? Because they never needed one. You should be able to give somebody everything they need to know.
He jokes writing resumes isn't supposed to be easy, rather a unique way to speak about yourself.
I'm not interested in what's the job title you're looking at. I'm much more interested in what's the skill set you want to take forward, right? What do you want to be doing all day?
Only 1 out of 4 resumes gets past AI and into the hands of a hiring manager. Bullen says understanding how the applicant tracking software works is the first step to getting noticed by a company.
The second step is making sure that the value is on the page so that you're introducing yourself, you're introducing what you do, and you're making it clear the value you bring when you get to the human reader.
Keep the resume simple.
So, Times New Roman, Calibri, Arial.
Don't include images, colors, or a unique font on your resume.
This kind of template can be really hard for the applicant tracking software to read.
Tailor each resume with keywords used in a specific job description.
They're telling you what they're looking for. You just have to work that into the pitch.
Bullen says the job hunting process goes beyond just writing words on a piece of paper.
Do what you can to understand the market. Do the market research, get informational interviews, talk to your network, talk to your people, understand the lay of the land that way, and network your way as much as possible.
Hey, it can be discouraging if you're out on the job market. So here's
Okay, so I hope that video was helpful in just getting a better idea of how the market's changed and just a couple tips and tricks. We'll continue with where to begin. So they give you a very brief overview. We'll go a little bit more in depth in terms of how to properly format this resume, just to make sure that whether or not you're a budding professional at the start of your career, or if you're like the other gentleman who's mid-career and wants a career change, that you're ready regardless where you are at life. So, to start, you should choose the format that best represents your experiences and strengths. So, there's three different ways that you can approach this. You can do chronological, which means that you're organizing based off of the time that it was completed. And it's typically recommended that you do it in reverse chronological order, meaning you do the most recent at the top with the oldest at the bottom, in order to ensure that the employer, like as you had seen in the video, they don't spend very much time looking at each resume, making sure that they see the most relevant information first. The second one is the functional format. So you group your skills into categories. So you can do communication, leadership, education, accolades, and having it organized this way. And so that way, if an employer is looking for a specific skill, for instance, communication, they can just go to your communication tab and immediately find what they're looking for. Um, or you can do a combination of the two. So you can have it where you have your functional categories, and then within those categories, you have your chronological order of when you completed them. So the main takeaway with this, regardless on what you choose, is that you choose the best way to present yourself, but both are very effective strategies. Now, I put my resume up here just so you can see what I did and what worked best for me. So I did the combination of the two. So I have my functional headers showing my education, work, and leadership experience. And then within each, I have my dates, so my chronological order on the right, where you can see what I'm currently working on and what I've done in the past. And then also for positions where it might not be as well known, like they don't have a lot of name recognition in terms of the position itself, I also put the hours per week that I invested in it, so that way they can see in terms of time frame how much time I invested within each position, which goes a long way. So, for instance, Ignite Fellow for Teach for America, that's not something that a lot of people, when they see the title of the position, recognize. So, I put that I spent 10 hours a week teaching, middle schoolers math. And that's kind of how that role functioned, in terms of the way that I went through my professional life at that time. Okay, so going back, we have our good versus bad example. I know the video touched on it very briefly, but now we can kind of sit and you can self-reflect as well in terms of looking at the resume on the left and the resume on the right, seeing what similarities or differences you have with each depending on how your current resume is formatted. So I implore you, while we're going through this section, pull up your resume and see if any of the things that I highlight as good or as bad or stuff that you see, and just notate it for later. So to start with the resume, um, on the left here, we have it in Times New Roman font, which makes it very easy and legible to read. We have the implementation of the headers, so we're following that functional outline, as well as the bolding of the times in reverse chronological order, so we're following that other outline as well. We kept the bullets short, 1 to 2 bullet points, in order to explain what the work was that was being accomplished. And then they also kept the information easy and readable at the top with no color. So it's just the email, phone number, and then the city that you're located in. So this is very excellent in terms of getting past AI screening, in terms of having it very easy and legible for the software to screen. But also, once it gets, hopefully, to the human, it's also very easy for them to digest as well. Now, with the one on the right here, we already see a couple issues that the speaker in the video had flagged. For instance, the color on the left here with the brown may confuse the AI scanner, so that's not really great for helping you get past that. Having the image is distracting as well because, um, in theory, it shouldn't matter what you look like when you're getting employed, so having this image doesn't really help you in any way in terms of getting that position. And then having a summary as well of your skills, that's not really helpful or conducive to getting to the information that your employer needs and can be a little distracting. And then also the way that this is organized, having the bar in the middle and then having all of this information on the right makes it a lot harder to digest for both the AI and the human screener. And then lastly, in terms of the information located here with the address, you don't need to disclose your physical address, especially since this is sensitive information. When you're doing mass applications, if you're doing it through Indeed, LinkedIn, these websites will store this information and then send it out to a bunch of employers. So having sensitive information like your physical address may not be the best approach. So you can do it like here on the left, they have their city that they're located in, so the employer knows where they are, but they don't disclose anything beyond that. And then the last one, which maybe this is new information or you hadn't heard of this one, but including the references at the bottom is actually looked down upon. It's preferred and in good practice to just provide references upon request, but traditionally having this information is just seen as like additional clutter and not actually a benefit to you in terms of this screening process. Okay, so speaking of the process, let's go through um, this whole section here, just an overview on how this works in terms of compiling your resume. So the first part we had mentioned was the data collection. So you have a general idea for the position type you're trying to pursue. So just sitting down with yourself, reviewing whether or not, like I had mentioned, if you're mid-career, thinking about all of the positions you've held in the past, and if you're looking for that career change, anything that is relevant in terms of volunteer experience or educational background may be relevant as well, and making sure you include that information. Composition. So you detail your work experience, your volunteering work, the job title, your employer, and your dates of employment, as well as bullet points of your responsibilities during this role. Like for instance, going back to my resume example with the Ignite Fellow, people don't know what an Ignite Fellow is, so those bullet points kind of explaining what the position entailed, what I did, and for how long really makes it mean something to employers when they're screening your application. And then for final review, I cannot emphasize this enough. You have to proofread, and if possible, have someone else proofread it just to make sure that that resume is formatted perfectly. For instance, little things like additional spaces, misaligned margins, bullet points that aren't like all in line, stuff like this. It makes such a big difference between having that like professional overview look versus having something that is a little underwhelming and maybe even a concern for employers, depending on the nature of the position. If you are applying for a job that detail orientation is very important, let's say you're going for paralegal or clerical assistant, having something as little as like an additional space when you're drafting emails to like um, big officials, this may actually be quite a big red flag for them. So always proofread. My rule of thumb is look at it 3 times, do it once immediately after, once the next day, and then once right before you submit the resume. And every single time I've done it, I've always found something that I missed the first time. So, um, yeah. Okay, so now that we've gone through this whole resume building, let's say in theory everything went well. You got through the AI, you got through the human checker, and now they've invited you back for the interview. What does this mean and how do you prep for that? So, with interview practices, you have to remember that while the resume is how you get your foot in the door, the ultimate hiring decision is made based off of the way that you present yourself with the actual person in this interview. So, being prepared, confident, and having a positive attitude will go a long way in terms of your success for this interview opportunity. And also remembering that this is a two-way conversation. So, making sure that when they're asking you these questions, you're not just passively answering them, but actually really sitting, thinking with it, and treating it like a conversation instead of just, question, response, question, response. And then one tip that I always go in with when I'm doing an interview, regardless of the formatting, is I always have those 3 points that I want to make, regardless of the questions asked, in mind. So that way, depending on no matter what the question was or how that interview went, I know for sure that I gave them the most relevant and pertinent information, and that got out at some point during this interview. Okay. So I cannot emphasize this enough. Be prepared, be flexible with scheduling and planning ahead. You're at the mercy of the interviewer or the panel, depending on the nature of your interview. So making sure that you're as available as they need you to be and being flexible will not only show good professionalism, but also enthusiasm for the position. If you don't really care about the job, then you're not going to be as willing to give up plans or take off time at work versus if you are. And it goes quite a long way in messaging positive signals to your potential future employer. And then also confirming all your logistical details. We do live in a digital era where the interview format may be totally asynchronous, meaning you do like a pre-recorded video and you submit that to your employer, or if it's live on Zoom or in person. So just making sure you have clarification, because the formatting has changed vastly since 2020. Okay, so going into the interview formatting itself. So, as I'd mentioned, ask about the interview structure, whether or not it's a singular interviewer or a panel, just so that way you're not caught off guard. Also requesting accommodations early if needed. For instance, like if you have a hearing deficiency, ensuring that closed captions are provided if it's a Zoom meeting, or if you need an interpreter, making sure that you have that available, or if you have a visual impairment, ensuring that there are audio transcriptions and descriptions of what's being talked about or shown at that time. So just knowing where you are and disclosing this information not only shows that you're very professional, but you also consider your own needs and how you can fit into this potential company that you're applying for. And then last but not least, determine the type of interview you're going for. So, depending on which industry you're going into, there's 3 different formatting types that are implemented traditionally for interview styles. So, if you're doing a technical service industry, it might vary a lot. Um, so, we'll go ahead and get into the different variations. So, the 3 traditional types of interview formats is your case study, your behavioral interview, and your group interview. And we'll get into what is what in the following slides. So, for your case study, this is an interview that analyzes how you deal with complex problems in real time. You may be asked to evaluate a scenario, interpret data, or propose solutions. So just making sure that you're comfortable like with the hypothetical situation and being able to combat this. So think of this as they're testing the water to see how you would react to a potential scenario within your future environment. So, and then this is common in a lot of these like public sector industries if you're going to be doing a lot of group work. In finance, this is also pretty common. For instance, with like one of the questions I have listed, How would you respond to declining revenues in one department? So these questions that I have listed, and hopefully you can refer back to later if you'd like once this video is posted, is always a good way to kind of test the waters to see how you would react in theory to a question style like this. So for the example I can walk you through is how would you improve efficiency for a struggling organization? They would usually give you like 2 minutes, and then you could say, well, if they're having efficiency issues, maybe implementing a task tracker to ensure that the time allotted is accurate and that people are able to finish whatever on time. So something like this, you can try and be as specific as you can um, to the position that you're applying for, and also giving very detailed recommendations is usually a good way to approach a case study style interview. So for behavioral interviews, so this is focused on how you handled a previous situation. So whereas the case study is looking towards the future with a hypothetical, behavioral is an actual thing that you had lived through. So this is real world. And then this is something that you've done previously and how you previously reacted. So they're looking for you to demonstrate specific skill sets when they're asking or conducting this behavioral interview. So they're looking for leadership, teamwork, adaptability, and problem-solving qualities within the candidate. And it's helpful when you're thinking about how to respond to these questions is using the STAR method. So situation, task, action, and result. So, for example, here you can say, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a conflict and how did you handle it? So, I feel like a lot of people, you can think of at least one time you've had a professional conflict. So, we can say, okay, my situation was I had a group project and that we have different communication styles. Okay. This resulted in a breakdown of communication and a tense work environment. So, this was the situation. Check. The task, we needed to complete this group project and present to a panel by the end of the semester. The action was we sat down as a group and decided that the best way to resolve our different communication style issue was to create a tracker with agreed upon dates that everything needs to be completed by to ensure that we stayed on time. Results, we had an effective and polished presentation available for our panelists. We got good marks. So this is kind of I guess, the student application of this behavioral interview. But depending on, as I'd mentioned, where you are in your career, if you're entry level or mid career, you may have different scenarios that come to mind in terms of the way that you handled conflicts in a professional or work setting. So the final style is the group style, which oftentimes is the most intimidating because the way this works is you're being interviewed with your direct competition in terms of the people who are going after the same job, which can be both a good thing and a bad thing. It allows you to see the type of people that the company is considering, what attributes they possess. But also, it's a little nerve wracking knowing that the person that you're supposed to be collaborating with may be the person who takes the job from you. But there are some strategies to mitigating a little bit of distress that you might feel. I know I had to do one of my first group interviews not too long ago when I was applying for law schools, and having to deal with looking directly at 8 of these candidates who all seemingly were very professional and qualified for the slot, and figuring out how to work with them and how to make sure I present myself in the best manner possible. So, they want to see the employer when you're conducting this interview. They want to be able to see your style and leadership and teamwork and your interpersonal skills, basically to measure how you play with others. So, if you are, a well spoken individual who is able to listen and is able to provide nuanced feedback that's engaging with the other points brought up by group members, that's more palatable than somebody who is very strong personality and kind of took over the conversation in that traditional leadership style that we tend to think of. So, having that good balance of not speaking over others and interacting with the information presented by your group members is a very good strategy when dealing with the group interview. And just being authentic to yourself. Like, as I'd mentioned in the beginning of this interview section, they're hiring a person. So, when you're thinking about personalities, the way that you are as a person, if you're kind, if you're, a little funny, something like this, it's good to also show some of that, personality within the interview as well. And then some common questions or activities you can work with your group to solve a problem or plan a project. So, going back to my law school example, they had us pretend that we were an admissions council and look over different applications to say whether or not we would accept or reject that student. So, very interesting to see how different industries will conduct that in terms of, like, if you're going for foreign service work, for instance, they'll give you a case study that you have to work with a group dealing with some type of foreign crisis, like an American is stuck in Azerbaijan and their visa expired, and how do you get that person back and stuff like that. So it varies a lot depending on the industry you're in. Okay. So now let's say the interview process went great, you got the position. Now you have to make sure that you can keep the position and maintain that level of professionalism and decorum, depending on if you're staying hybrid or doing a fully remote position. This is also helpful, though, in general, as we get increasingly more digitized with the type of work that we're doing, to make sure that we maintain that level of professionalism online as well as in person. So, I'm sure we all remember living through the pandemic, but under the pandemic, there was a rapid shift from primarily in-person office settings to almost exclusively online when we had our shutdowns. So, having this like massive shift, there was a lot of social norms that had to be developed in 2020 in terms of the way individuals should approach the office setting. For instance, I am sure we all remember at least one video going around of a coworker standing up and they're in their pajama pants, or they have their kids screaming and crying in the background, or the dog barking, or something was going on. So, we had to establish netiquette, which is network etiquette, in order to like provide some social norms on how to go about navigating this online space in a professional manner. So these are informal rules. So there nothing will be illegal if your kid starts crying in the background. It's just something that you have to consider, for instance, when you're doing an interview or if you're conducting, let's say, a webinar, making sure that you have a clean background. So I always blur my backgrounds. And making sure you have good lighting, they're able to hear you well. All of these things go a long way in terms of presenting yourself professionally when you're either conducting the interview if it's online, or if you are having a hybrid position and making sure that you continue that level of professionalism and care during your role. So, first and foremost, as I'd mentioned with the pajama pants, attire. So, attire is still important even when you're online. You do see like from your shoulder up, so you can think anything that you would see in a headshot, you will see in the Zoom setting. So this also communicates respect. So when you come in and you're in pajamas or you're in a sweatshirt and you have the hood up, this is showing that like this you're not giving the position as much care as somebody, let's say, who came in like a blouse or button up and looks very well put together. So the general rule of thumb is that you should just dress neat, modest, and wear appropriate clothing. So for an interview, you should do business, professional, or casual, depending on what they dictate to you and the level of the position. And then for networking events, you can do polished but approachable, and then casual settings, you can wear whatever, but just make sure it's so modest and clean looking. So, and as I'd mentioned, it's really just the top up. So, so long as this part looks good, maybe like I've seen a couple issues where they have in theory a very nice professional top in person, but maybe if it's a lower cut blouse or if it's off the shoulder, it looks a little interesting online. So also taking into consideration how this frame will impact the way that the outfit looks when you're going on Zoom. So why does this matter in terms of real world connection? So our online behavior shapes the way that people will interact with us in the real world. So, your digital behavior influences how you're perceived and whether or not you're considered professional. And this also translates into your real world expectations. Like your job is real, even if you're online. Like, and it's primarily limited to this digital space. That check that you get, that review that you get from your employer, that's all very tangible and real. So, the key connection here is just remembering that the way that you present yourself translates into different components. For instance, when you come dressed professionally, this is conveying that you respect it, like the position, and you can build trust with your employer. When you're clear and concise online and you provide a nice email, you prevent misunderstandings. When you convey yourself and like talk in a professional tone, it signals that you're credible. And then last but not least, knowing who your audience is, if you're talking with a coworker versus you're talking with the CEO of the company, ensuring that you kind of up the ante with the type of, language you're using, will help you guide your behavior and your presentation of self. But yeah, so that's the brief overview on Netiquette. I don't want to, hit it too much because I'm sure we've all been navigating the Zoom space for a little bit, but just a refresher in case. Now, my favorite portion is the impact of AI on the future job market. So, there's been a lot of information going around, at least as a young professional in our collegiate setting, particularly from professors who are concerned about the market of humanities positions, for instance, the legal field, approximately like 80% of these lower level positions in theory are being replaced by AI. And how does this actually like work? Is this true? So I did a little bit of research just to give you just a baseline for general across sectors. So, while approximately 37% of companies expect to replace some roles with AI, AI will also create a lot of new positions. So, roughly 78 million jobs are projected by 2030 to be created. So, we have to understand that AI is not replacing humans, but more like reskilling. So, not fighting AI in the introduction of it into our jobs, but also knowing that, like, maybe this additional certification on how to use AI for whatever sector you're in, and like if you're doing audits, for instance, how can you use AI as a skill, as a like a helper to check the information that you're inputting, and make you more palatable and efficient for future employers? So, just understanding what this means, we have to remember human centricity. So, ultimately, the tools that we create are just that, tools, and we still need to have this human component in order to effectively complete the tasks and jobs that are out there. So, it's really important that we develop these soft skills, as I'd mentioned in our interviews, and the way that we interact with humans. Even in the resume review process, there's always going to be that human component, and maintaining and emphasizing these like human soft skill tasks, for instance, how we relate to one another, emotional intelligence, being able to navigate these like unique social contexts is something that is uniquely human. So emphasizing this and using this as a strength and asset as it is will really help you become a good candidate, as a standout candidate, and be an AI augmented candidate instead of somebody who's just, um, you know, using AI as a replacement instead of as something to supplement your current skill set. Okay, so going back now to the EduPower Initiative. So at the end, we all want the same thing. We all want everyone to be successful, to find their dream job or career. And ensuring that was something that I really wanted to do by the end of my collegiate career at University of Miami. So, and I found this really interesting statistic. So, according to 2026 continuing education research, 87% of individuals who earn a professional certificate reported tangible career benefits, with 25% of entry level certificate holders successfully securing new jobs. So that's 1 in 4 individuals saying that because they got this additional certificate, that this helped them either become a standout candidate, provide them with the basic knowledge that they need once they get the position. All of this is very helpful in getting you to those next steps, which is why I'm gonna harp on this again. I have the EduPower Initiative. So these are all training created through Childcare Ed, which is an internationally accredited service where you can get online asynchronous trainings, and at the conclusion, you receive a certificate. So I have the 4 listed. We currently did the resume and interview one together. But if you want to receive the certificate, you can go online and complete it asynchronously and receive that certificate. There will be a post test and questions that you go throughout that I didn't incorporate in this. That will help you ensure that you were paying attention, that you understand, and you digested the information presented. And all of these trainings range between an hour and 2 hours. So, while we're talking about professional development, if you would like to develop yourself further, feel free to use any of these free resources provided. But that's all from me in terms of this slide set. So thank you so much for listening.